Here's an article in the Hill online newspaper entitled Bernanke warns lawmakers nation headed for massive fiscal cliff. This probably doesn't come to much surprise to anyone, at least I hope it doesn't, because basically it's the same song, different dance. But I must say that he is stating it in a more direct and emphatic way. Usually it's a little bit more sugar-coated. But he's basically saying that if Congress fails to extend the Bush tax cuts and the payroll tax cut, allow it to expire, and cut the 1.2 trillion in spending that they are supposed to be forced to cut as a result of the failure of the super committee to come up with some other plan or solution. If they allow those things to happen, that GDP could be essentially cut in half, the economy would basically slow down. He says that GDP growth in 2013 could be down from 2.6% to 1%. And he actually makes reference to the EU, and I think Greece specifically in this article, basically indicating that some of the same things that's happening to them, if we don't be careful, it could happen to us. So I'm just going to go over this article. It says Congress risks taking the economy over a massive fiscal cliff. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke warned lawmakers on Wednesday. In remarks that hit Wall Street stock prices, the central bank boss suggested the economy could hit a serious roadblock if Congress allows the Bush tax rates and a payroll tax cut to expire and $1.2 trillion in spending cuts to be implemented simultaneously in January. So he basically saying that those three things can't happen at the same time. Under current law on January 1st, 2013, there's going to be a massive fiscal cliff of large spending cuts and tax increases, Bernanke told the House Financial Service Committee. I hope that Congress will look at that and figure out ways to achieve the same long-run fiscal improvement without having it happen at one date. All those things are hitting on the same day, basically. It's quite a big event. The tax hikes and spending cuts could knock GDP growth in 2013 down from 2.6% to 1%, according to Andrew Fieldhouse, a federal budget policy analyst with the Liberal Economic Policy Institute. There's obviously a huge fiscal drag pending if Congress adheres to existing law, he said. Bernanke comments underline the stakes for this year's post-election lame duck session of Congress, when the fate of the tax rates and spending cuts are likely to be determined. Congress is also not expected to raise the debt ceiling until after Election Day, but is unlikely to be able to punt that decision beyond the lame duck session. The nation's AAA credit rating hangs in the balance, with agencies likely to decide on whether to downgrade the United States depending on what happens to the debt ceiling, tax rates, and spending cuts. The fiscal triple whammy was set up by the failure of Super Committee of lawmakers to agree on a deficit cutting plan last year. Bernanke, who has long advised policymakers to rein in the deficit, called again Wednesday for a credible plan to reassure markets that the nation is repairing its finances. Failure to do so could trigger another financial crisis and sharply higher interest rates, as is happening in Europe, he said. There's the reference to Europe. Bernanke warned that draining funds from the economy by allowing tax cuts to expire and trimming spending could slow growth. Yes, but at the same time, he is recommending that they do something about the debt. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to protect the recovery in the near term, he warned. Some Republicans, such as John McCain, have already vowed to find alternatives to the spending cuts which would hit the Pentagon, and the fight over the Bush tax rates will be a central theme of the presidential election. President Obama wants to extend the individual tax rates for families with annual incomes below $250,000 and individuals below $200,000, while allowing tax rates on higher income to rise. Republicans want to extend all the Bush-era rates. Congressional Democrats are increasingly embracing $1 million in income as the right threshold above which higher income taxes should kick in. Obviously, the Speaker is opposed to the massive tax hike that Washington Democrats have engineered for the end of the year. Michael Steele, a spokesman for House Speaker John Boehner, said Wednesday. While economic conditions have improved and unemployment rate has fallen, Bernanke warned that the labor market is still far from normal. The unemployment rate remains elevated, long-term unemployment is still near record levels, and the number of persons working part-time for economic reasons is very high, he said. Underlying data suggests that economic expansion is uneven and modest by historical standards, and Europe's debt crisis remains a persistent threat to the U.S. recovery, he said. The Fed has lowered interest rates effectively to zero and vowed to keep them there through the end of 2014 in response to those challenges, but Bernanke suggested there is little more the central bank can do. Can't lower the interest rates any lower than zero, and by him making that statement, he's also suggesting that printing money is no longer a viable solution or option, and in my opinion, it hasn't been for a long time now. Monetary policy is not a panacea, he said. The long-term health of the economy depends mostly on decisions taken by Congress and the administration. Bernanke acknowledged the difficult policies of taxes and spending cuts. These criticisms are easy for me to make, he said. I don't have to deal with the politics. He steered clear of recommending a specific deficit reduction path for Congress, but said it is very important to address rising health care costs. Red flag, repeat, but said it is very important to address rising health care costs and that the economy would benefit from a clear plan from Congress to reform the housing market. That's easier said than done. Our politicians are unable to come to an agreement regarding the tough decisions and plans that must be implemented to even slow down the country's progression towards the economic cliff, because they are afraid that they may upset their constituents, who may respond by not voting for them or fund their campaigns for re-election. The American people continue to fall for the partisanship and the finger-pointing, which politicians use as an excuse for their failure, and consequently, they fail the American people to realize that elected officials in all three branches of government are a collective, colossal failure from the president on down, irrespective of party affiliation. Our representatives in the U.S. government and both political parties are failing the citizens of the United States in the same manner as the governments for the bankrupt countries in the European Union has failed their people. The United States has been able to continue to receive loans and funding from abroad because our currency is our hottest commodity, due to the fact that it is the world's reserve currency, which means it is the currency used for international trade, thus increasing the demand abroad for the currency. Reliance on this luxury of being able to create wealth by merely putting ink to paper has lulled the country's leader into a false sense of security, causing them to erroneously devalue the importance of having strong manufacturing industries within the country. Instead, they seek to import goods from overseas at a lower cost. The end result is not enough jobs for its citizens. This, of course, cannot be resolved with a quick fix. So the country's leaders continue to milk the cow by raising the debt ceiling so that they can borrow more money, and they also print more money. However, the higher the availability of any commodity, product, or service, the lower the value. The lower the value, the lower the demand. So, every time the printing presses roll, the value of your dollar decreases.
The more dollars you have, the more value you lose. The incompetence of our political leaders has caught the attention of international leaders. Several are having discussions and making preparations to introduce a new reserve currency or currencies to replace the dollar. This cannot be done easily. Nonetheless, the value of the once mighty dollar, which is the backbone of not only the U.S., but in many ways the world, is apparently, inevitably, heading for a cliff, and there doesn't seem to be anything anybody can do about it at this point, even if they wanted to. And it is all because of greed and the love of money, which was itself created to generate more wealth and control for its creators. This is why it was taken off of the gold standard, and this is when uncontrollable greed kicked in.